In the vibrant city of Leitrim, known for its flourishing music scene and historic venues, the Palladium stood as a testament to times long past. This opulent theater, with its tarnished golden trims and faded red velvet seats, had witnessed countless performances, from rock legends to symphonic orchestras. But tonight, it would host something entirely different. The concert was a much-anticipated event, marking the return of the enigmatic band, Obsidian Echoes, after a mysterious 3-year hiatus. Fans, clad in black and shimmering silver, lined up hours before the doors opened, their excitement palpable in the crisp evening air. Little did they know, their night of musical ecstasy would soon turn into a chilling ordeal. As the crowd filled the ancient theater, a peculiar tension hung over the Palladium. Whispers of the band's abrupt disappearance and the untimely death of their former drummer circulated among the fans. Some said it was a tragic accident, others whispered of darker, more sinister reasons. But tonight, the new drummer, a shadowy figure with a rumored past in arcane arts, would take the stage. The concert began with a pulsating beat, the lights syncing perfectly with the thunderous music. The lead singer, Julian, his voice a perfect blend of gravel and silk, captivated the audience. However, midway through their third song, Veil of Shadows, the electricity in the air shifted. The stage lights flickered, casting long, twisting shadows against the walls. The audience, entranced by the rhythm, barely noticed the anomaly. Suddenly, the music crescendoed into a chaotic symphony, the new drummer's intensity growing unnaturally. The flickering lights intensified, now flashing wildly, bathing the Palladium in eerie, intermittent darkness. Amidst the strobing chaos, some in the crowd swore they saw figures, silhouettes that did not belong, dancing in the periphery of their vision. Julian's voice began to distort, his lyrics twisting into incantations. The atmosphere thickened, as if the air itself was alive with whispered threats and muted screams. The crowd, now uneasy, found themselves unable to move, their bodies swaying not of their own volition but as if controlled by the pulsating rhythm of the drums. In the upper balconies, Elise, a young journalist known for her skepticism, started recording the event on her phone. She noticed the anomalies, the way the shadows seemed to cling a little too closely, the way the drummer's eyes seemed void of light. Her heart raced as she realized something truly horrifying was unfolding. As the concert reached its peak, the power in the building surged. A massive blackout struck, plunging the theater into complete darkness. The music stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of collective breaths and muffled panic. When the emergency lights finally flickered on, Julian was nowhere to be seen. The stage was empty except for the drummer, who sat motionless, staring into the crowd with an unnerving smile. The police arrived within minutes, their radios crackling with static as they tried to make sense of the 911 calls describing impossible horrors. The crowd spilled out into the streets, their faces pale, their eyes wide with fear. Julian was declared missing, and the drummer was taken into custody, though he spoke not a word, only smiled that same chilling smile. Elise reviewed her footage, her hands trembling. The video was distorted, filled with static and inexplicable shadows that seemed to move against the flow of the crowd. She knew she had stumbled upon a story far bigger than a simple concert review. Something had happened tonight at the Palladium, something that defied explanation and demanded investigation. Determined to uncover the truth, Elise set out to delve deeper into the history of Obsidian Echoes, the mysterious disappearance of their former drummer, and the dark rumors that surrounded the band. Her investigation would lead her down a path filled with arcane symbols, unexplained phenomena, and the realization that some doors, once opened, might never be closed. As Elise pieced together the puzzle, each step brought her closer to a truth that might just pull her into the same shadows that had swallowed Julian. The question was, how deep was she willing to go, and what would she sacrifice to reveal what truly happened that night at the Palladium? Elise's investigation began with a visit to the city's historical archives. The Palladium, a relic of the Roaring Twenties, held many secrets, its walls echoing tales of grandeur and scandal. Elise sifted through dusty files and yellowed photographs, searching for anything that might explain the disturbing events she had witnessed. Her fingers traced the edges of an old newspaper clipping, the headline screaming about a tragic fire in the Palladium during a magic show in 1934. The article mentioned several unexplained disappearances among the audience members, incidents which were hastily covered up by local authorities at the time. Elise's pulse quickened as she realized the similarities to the recent concert. Was there a pattern of supernatural occurrences linked to the venue itself? Meanwhile, the drummer, identified only as Malachi, remained in a solitary holding cell. His interrogation tapes were a chilling montage of silence and cryptic smiles. He offered no information about Julian's whereabouts or the strange phenomena during the concert. However, a detective noted an odd occurrence during one session. Despite the room being securely locked and observed, shadows seemed to dance along the walls, independent of any discernible light source. Back at the Palladium, Elise walked the empty corridors, her flashlight casting long shadows. She entered the backstage area, where the air felt inexplicably colder. Old props and costumes were strewn about, as if left in a hurry. In a small, forgotten dressing room, Elise found a collection of ancient texts and arcane objects that appeared to belong to Malachi. Among these items, a worn leather-bound journal stood out, filled with sketches of ritualistic symbols and disjointed notes about opening the veil and summoning the echo. As night deepened, the Palladium seemed to groan under the weight of its own history. Elise's flashlight flickered as she explored deeper, the silence broken only by her own footsteps and the occasional, inexplicable creak far off in the dark. She felt watched. Fleeting movements in the periphery of her vision suggested she was not alone. Her investigation took her to the upper balconies where the wealthiest patrons once sat in opulent isolation. It was here, hidden beneath the floorboards of a rarely used private box, that she found a series of old letters between a stage magician named Thaddeus Blackburn and a mysterious figure known only as M. The letters spoke of a partnership that turned sour, a dangerous act that was supposed to climax in a spectacular fashion but ended in disaster and death. Elise's research into the band, Obsidian Echoes, revealed further anomalies. Previous concerts were often marred by technical issues, bizarre accidents, and the occasional disappearance of an audience member. Interviews with past band members, conducted under the guise of a documentary, hinted at a deep-seated fear of Malachi, whose joining coincided with the onset of these strange occurrences. The deeper Elise delved, the more the fabric of reality seemed to fray around her. Photos from the concert night, when enhanced, showed not just the chaotic shadows she remembered, but faces contorted in horror, as if trapped within the walls of the Palladium itself. One night, driven by a compulsion she couldn't explain, Elise returned to the Palladium, alone and against her better judgment. The moon was a thin crescent, barely lighting her path as she made her way to the stage where the concert had spiraled into chaos. The air was thick, charged with a palpable sense of anticipation, as if the theater itself was waiting for something or someone. As she stood on the stage, the air around her began to shimmer, the boundaries between the present and the past blurring. The shadows grew darker, thicker, coalescing into the shape of a person. Malachi's voice echoed through the hall. Though he was not there, the veil thins, the echoes grow louder. They are listening. Elise felt a cold dread settle in her heart. She was no longer just an observer, she had become a part of the story, a piece of the puzzle that was slowly, terrifyingly, falling into place. The shadows twisted and turned, whispering secrets in a language she felt she almost understood. The story of the Palladium, of Obsidian Echoes, was far from over. It was a story of thresholds crossed, of things invited in from the dark. And Elise was now inextricably linked to its next chapter. As Elise became enveloped by the darkness of the Palladium, her senses sharpened to the whispers that seemed to seep from the very walls. The theater, a nexus of unseen energies, began to reveal its true nature, a stage set not for plays or concerts but for encounters with the arcane. With every step she took, the air around her thickened, charged with a raw, electric energy that made her skin prickle. Back at her apartment, the walls seemed to close in as she pored over the materials she'd collected. The letters, the journal entries, and the erratic footage, all pieces of a puzzle that whispered of ancient rites and forgotten realms. As she tried to make sense of the scattered notes, Elise felt as though the room grew colder, the shadows darker. It was as if her investigation had drawn the attention of whatever forces lurked within the Palladium. Her sleep became haunted by dreams of swirling mists and indistinct figures, beckoning her from beyond a veiled threshold. Each morning, she awoke feeling less rested, her mind filled with fragments of arcane knowledge she couldn't remember acquiring. It was during one such morning, her coffee untouched and cold, that she made a connection that chilled her to the bone. The ritual described in Malachi's journal was not mere stagecraft but an invocation, a call across the boundaries of reality. The drummer had intended to use the concert as a catalyst, the collective energy of the crowd fueling a portal to somewhere else. Julian's disappearance, the strange apparitions, could they have been part of something far more real and terrifying than any show? Driven by a need for answers, Elise contacted a professor of esoteric studies, Dr. Harrow, whose work she had stumbled upon during her research. He was a recluse, known for his theories on the intersection of sound, human consciousness, and dimensional barriers. After some persuasion, he agreed to meet, his curiosity piqued by her description of the events and Malachi's involvement. They met at a dimly lit cafe, the outside world a mere murmur compared to the storm of theories that passed between them. Dr. Harrow listened intently, his eyes occasionally widening with a mix of fear and fascination. "What you're describing," he murmured, "aligns with the theoretical framework of auditory gates, a concept deemed too radical even for most of my peers. If Malachi somehow succeeded, he might have opened something that cannot easily be closed." Elise felt a chill as she considered his words. The implications were enormous and horrifying. If the Palladium was a gateway, what might come through it? The disappearances, the shadows, the eerie recordings, all these phenomena might be just the beginning. Compelled by a mixture of dread and determination, Elise and Dr. Harrow planned to return to the Palladium. They equipped themselves with audio recording gear, electromagnetic frequency meters, and infrared cameras. If there was something at the theater, something born from sound and shadow, they would detect it. The night of their investigation was oppressively silent, as if the city itself held its breath. The Palladium loomed before them, its facade more foreboding than ever. Inside, the darkness seemed almost palpable, a physical presence that resisted the beams of their flashlights. As they set up their equipment on the stage, the silence was broken by a low hum, a vibration that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Dr. Harrow's meters spiked erratically, and the air around them shimmered with a subtle, unsettling energy. "We're close," he whispered, his voice tinged with both excitement and fear. "Whatever Malachi summoned, it's still here. It's real." They began recording, the software of the cameras and the crackle of the audio equipment the only sounds in the vast, empty auditorium. But as the minutes stretched into hours, the atmosphere shifted. The temperature dropped, and a fog began to roll across the stage, creeping towards them like a living thing. Elisa's heart raced as she scanned the theater with her camera. Through the viewfinder, she saw what looked like figures, dozens of them, standing in the balconies, watching, waiting. She turned to Dr. Harrow, about to speak, when the entire building shook. A sound, deep and resonant, filled the air, not coming from the speakers but from the theater itself, as if the building was moaning. Terrified but transfixed, they watched as the figures in the balconies seemed to move closer, their features becoming clearer. Not just shadows, but people, their eyes empty, their expressions haunted. These were the lost souls of the Palladium, trapped in a limbo of their own making, a consequence of a door left ajar between worlds. As the realization dawned on Elise, the ground beneath her feet trembled #concert horror stories that are actually true, Final chapter. As Elise stepped forward, the light from the crack enveloped her completely, swallowing her whole into its blinding embrace. The air around her vibrated with the echo of ancient chants, the language unfamiliar yet oddly resonant within her mind. Her reality blurred, the boundaries of the physical world melting away as she entered a realm suspended between time and space. The spectral figures that had surrounded her on the stage now appeared more distinct, their expressions tormented, endlessly reliving their tragedies. Elise realized she was not just seeing them, she was experiencing their emotions, their final moments replayed in a loop of despair and longing. The theater had become a prison for these souls, their energies tethered to the very fabric of the Palladium by the dark ritual Malachi had unleashed. Amidst this chaos, Elise saw Julian again, his figure clearer now, standing at what seemed like the center of the rift. He was surrounded by a storm of shadows, his face contorted in pain as he struggled against unseen bonds. As she approached, the shadows recoiled, allowing her a path to reach him. "Julian," she called out, her voice strangely amplified in this limbo. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Elise, you have to close the breach. It's feeding on the energy of the souls, it won't stop until it consumes everything." "But how?" Elise's voice trembled, overwhelmed by the gravity of their plight. The journal, Malachi's ritual, was incomplete. "You must reverse it, finish what he started in the right way," Julian explained, his voice urgent. He pointed to a spot on the ground where the light pulsed strongest. "There, you must perform the counter-ritual." Elise nodded, her resolve hardening. She retrieved the journal from her bag, its pages now fluttering open as if guided by an unseen hand. The text shimmered before her eyes, the arcane symbols rearranging themselves into a coherent formula. She understood what needed to be done, the words resonating deep within her soul as if she was always meant to read them. With Julian's guidance, she began the chant, her voice steady despite the swirling chaos around them. The shadows writhed and screamed, a cacophony of terror as the rift felt the pull of closure. Each word Elise spoke seemed to draw energy from the surroundings, the light intensifying, the wind howling as if in protest. As she reached the climax of the ritual, a profound silence fell over the realm. The light exploded in a blinding flash, then suddenly dimmed, receding back into the crack on the stage floor. The shadows dissipated, their presence ebbing away as the souls found release from their eternal torment. The air cleared, the oppressive energy lifting, replaced by a gentle calm. Elise felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Julian, now free from the shadows. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with relief. But his form began to fade, a sign that his time in this plane was ending. "Thank you, Elise. For everything." "Will I see you again?" she asked, a sense of loss enveloping her heart. "Perhaps, in another life," he smiled, his figure dissolving into the light that now gently illuminated the Palladium. As the realm stabilized, Elise found herself back on the physical stage, the theater quiet, the emergency lights casting a soft glow around her. Dr. Harrow emerged from the shadows, awe and relief etched on his face. "You did it, Elise. It's over." But as they left the theater, stepping out into the chill of the early morning, Elise knew in her heart that some doors, once opened, never truly closed. The Palladium would always be a place touched by the otherworldly, its history forever marked by the night when the veil was torn. And for Elise, life would never be the same. She had looked into the abyss, touched the fabric of the unknown, and emerged changed. The shadows might have receded, but they lingered at the edge of her vision, a constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the realms beyond. As she walked away from the Palladium, the first light of dawn casting long shadows on the pavement, Elise felt a chill wind brush against her cheek, a whisper from the unseen, a hint that her journey into the dark heart of the unknown was far from over. The end was just another beginning.